On July 21st, 2021, an unknown player stunned the Roblox obby community by beating Stairway to Heaven, an obby thought to be completely impossible. What made it even more surprising was that this player had only been known for a few months. Stairway to Heaven was seen as the absolute limit, and no one else had come close. This breakthrough marked the start of what would become one of the longest lasting journeys the community would ever endure. Before we start this video, I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe. Only a small percentage of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. And with your help, I want to reach 30,000 subscribers by the end of summer. So if you could hit that red button, it would mean the world to me. Anyway, let's get back into the video. On June 11th, 2021, a person named MARCUSTERRY posted a video completing a low tier 16 obby called Hope for Amendment. In the scale in which Roblox obbies are ranked, this is around 8,000 times harder than Tower of Hell. So this was no simple task, especially for someone who is completely unknown and very mysterious. But it wasn't until 2 days later, when he posted the first stage of Untitled Chapter, that people really started to take notice. This is Untitled Chapter, a legendary tier 17 obby. At the time, the absolute hardest obby if it were to be beaten, split into 2 brutal stages that include some of the hardest jumps Roblox has ever seen. For quite a while, players had attempted to conquer it, but no one succeeded. The first stage alone was frustrating in itself, as some of the best hobbyists failed time and time again. The whole obby though, no one had ever come close to beating it. But then came Marcus. To everyone's disbelief, Marcus seemed to fly through the first stage of Untitled Chapter. His movements seemed almost robotic because of how good he was. With the community watching in shock, all of his movements were extremely precise, and there were no moments of visible stress. Stage 1 was a challenge that had humbled even the best, and yet Marcus was beating it like it was nothing. But those who knew about the obby understood that Marcus probably won't beat the second stage. Completing the whole obby is just too much to ask. After all, no one had ever done it before. This wasn't just another tier 16 obby. It was the hardest obby on Roblox if beaten. Only 4 days later, Marcus did the unthinkable. He beat Untitled Chapter, not just the first stage that had already stunned everyone, but the entire thing. Every last jump that no one had ever done before. With this verification, Marcus claimed the top 1 completion, a title that felt weird to give to such an unknown hobbyist. It was a moment that shook the foundation of the obby world, and speculation spread like wildfire. Could Marcus actually be legitimate, or was something more sinister at play? How could someone unknown suddenly rise to become the greatest hobbyist in Roblox history? Players who had spent years perfecting obbies found themselves in doubt. Marcus's improvement felt almost unhuman. But Marcus wasn't done. Over the next few months, he set out on a path that no one had foreseen, systematically destroying obbies that were believed to be beyond human capabilities. And first came Back There Benjamin, an obby that would be, yet again, a top 1. With its difficulty being tier 18, it was a leap ahead of what the community had ever seen. No one had even thought of possibly beating this obby anytime soon. The skill gap between Marcus and the rest of the community was unfathomable. Marcus's skill was far beyond the capabilities of even the top tier players at the time. It wasn't a conversation who was the best anymore. Marcus was the best obbyist. Players could only dream of conquering an obby such as back there Benjamin. And yet Marcus, with almost supernatural precision, completed the obby in a way that left even the best obbyist in shock. He made everything look effortless. The community barely had any time to process this achievement before Marcus moved on to his next conquest. Sharp Mint, a harder version of the already infamous tier 16 obby, Mint Skies, but this time with a twist. No checkpoints. Without the 5 checkpoints that Mint Skies offered, Sharp Mint had ascended to high tier 17. However, this time, Marcus didn't officially record his completion. Marcus didn't have any actual proof, but players in the same game as him saw it happen. They watched as he flawlessly maneuvered through the obby, recording the run themselves as Marcus weaved through Sharp Mint with an eerie mastery. The fact that his own completion wasn't formally documented only made the feat even more mysterious, sparking more conversation. And finally, Tower of Vacant Hindrances, the first tower in JTO history to surpass the official difficulty chart. The tower moved beyond catastrophic difficulty into a new tier altogether, horrific difficulty. The tower itself had extremely precise jumps that no one had thought would ever be conquered considering its length. It was the pinnacle of Ito at the time, and once again, Marcus stood at the top. His completion of Tower of Vacant Hindrances immediately gained the attention of the larger obbying community, the Ito community. And now, when everyone was watching, Marcus performed his last completion. On July 21st, 2021, Marcus achieved what many believe to be the pinnacle of Roblox obbying. He beat Stairway to Heaven. An obby ranked at tier 19 when he officially completed it. Compared to all of the other obbies, Stairway to Heaven was on a completely different level. It was miles harder, a test so extreme that it seemed almost beyond human capability. When Marcus announced the completion, the obby community was left in disbelief. The rumors about MARCUSTERRY's achievements were initially dismissed as just accusations, but not even a full day later, that would all change.
Alright, hello everyone, Marcus here. Today I'll be addressing the cheating allegations that people have been saying. And well, this whole time, we've been using something called replayability that I made like a few months ago. It's pretty trash, but it managed to fool pretty much the whole obby community, which is kind of funny.
It was revealed that all of MARCUSTERRY's mind-boggling verifications had been faked. The account, operated by both Akira and Wathek, used an advanced replayability system that allowed them to pre-record gameplay and replay it in front of live audiences, making it seem like they were completing impossible feats in real time. This intricate method fooled the entire community for months, convincing the community that MARCUSTERRY's completions were real. Together, they executed one of the most sophisticated hoaxes in Roblox obby history, fooling hundreds of players who watched the fake runs unfold in real time. When the truth finally surfaced, the community was in shock. MARCUSTERRY's name became a symbol of fraud. The community didn't give up though. Obbyists weren't going to let the obbies that Marcus cheated go falsely verified. In fact, they wanted revenge. They wanted to beat MARCUSTERRY. As the obby community reeled from the shocking revelations surrounding MARCUSTERRY's cheating scandal, one player was slowly but steadily rising in the shadows, and his name was Boomsasuk. In the first half of 2021, while the obby community had its eyes fixed on MARCUSTERRY and his seemingly unstoppable reign, Boomsasuk was quietly working his way up, mastering some of the hardest obbies Roblox had to offer. In January of 2021, Boomsasuk uploaded his first video to YouTube, with his completion of Tower of Inception, a terrifying difficulty tower from Ito. For many, this was an impressive feat, but it was far from the top echelon of Roblox obbying. Compared to obbies such as low tier 17 Honor, at the time the hardest obby beaten, Tower of Inception was still considered quite simple. Boomsasuk was a newcomer. However, things changed fast. Just a month later, in February of 2021, Boomsasuk took the community by surprise when he uploaded a video of his completion of Tower of Champions Road, a catastrophic difficulty tower. The leap in difficulty was impressive. Boomsasuk was quickly proving that he had the level of skill that could rival the very best. After his victory on Tower of Champions Road, Boomsasuk dove headfirst into the world of tiered obbies. Over the next few months, he consistently took down some of the hardest obbies on Roblox. Each one was an obby pushing the limits of human ability. More and more players started to take notice of his meteoric rise. But the real turning point came when MARCUSTERRY supposedly achieved the unthinkable, beating Tower of Vacant Hindrances, the first ever horrific difficulty tower. Horrific towers were the stuff the Ito community mentioned once in a while, but always assuming that it would still take a long time for one to actually get beaten. Towers that only existed in the theoretical limits of what players could achieve. Marcus's completion was, in every way, a defining moment in Roblox obby history. But after Marcus posted the video confessing to cheating, suddenly, the legitimacy of his accomplishments was gone, and the stage was set for our new player to step into the spotlight. And Boomsasuk saw his opportunity. Boomsasuk had already set his sights on Tower of Vacant Hindrances. If MARCUSTERRY hadn't actually beaten the tower, then the top spot was still open, and Boomsasuk was determined to claim it for himself. He spent weeks grinding and perfecting his consistency, and then, on September 8th, 2021, Boomsasuk made history. He became the first legitimate player to beat Tower of Vacant Hindrances. The tower that was once thought impossible had finally fallen to a real player. Although, it wasn't just a personal achievement. The first of 5 Marcus's cheated obbies had been verified, and there were only 4 left to go. In his completion message, Boomsasuk expressed the weight of his achievement, stating, "The catastrophic barrier has been broken." Tower of Vacant Hindrances was a milestone that marked a new era in obbying, leading to many horrific and even unreal towers being beaten in the future. Boomsasuk's name was now etched into the history of the obby community as the first to truly break the catastrophic barrier. And the best part, as Boomsasuk put it, there's still more to come. Following the historic achievement, Boomsasuk didn't stop. Over the next year, he took on some of the most difficult tier 17 obbies on Roblox, adding to his growing list of completions. Among them were legendary obbies like the Nightmare, Tower of the Roof's Peak, and Tower of Eternal Void. But there was one obby that he couldn't shake from his mind, Anata wa Horbimasu, the very obby that had catapulted MARCUSTERRY into the spotlight. It was an obby that symbolized MARCUSTERRY's rise to fame. For Boomsasuk, There was something poetic about taking on this particular obby. In November 2022, Boomsasuk began his grind. Anata wo Horbimasu was brutal. Jumps that require incredible precision, and techniques that only the most elite players could execute consistently. Each attempt slowly chipped away at his motivation, but Boomsasuk wasn't like most hobbyists. He knew that Anata wo Horbimasu was one of the hardest obbies ever created, and he was prepared to give everything to beat it. And on August 12, 2022, he did just that. With Anata wo Horbimasu completed, Boomsasuk had now beaten one of the toughest obbies ever created. Just like Tower of Vacant Hindrances, it was a monumental completion. But the journey wasn't over yet. MARCUSTERRY had falsely verified 5 obbies, and while Anata wo Horbimasu had been the second to fall, there were still 3 more obbies left to conquer. Sharp Mint, Baghdad Benjamin, and the notorious Stairway to Heaven. If Anata wo Horbimasu had seemed hard, these next obbies were in a league of their own. Each one represented a new set of skills that few could even hope to overcome. And the next step in this long, brutal climb was Sharp Mint, a name that barely hints at the difficulty it holds. This isn't just an obby you can tank your way through. It consists of very janky gameplay, bricks twisted in angles that made jumps extremely confusing. The obby was built perfectly to make every jump awkward and inconsistent. Every jump demanded a strategy, and even then, it was never guaranteed to work. Failing became second nature when grinding Sharp Mint. The obby wasn't just hard because it was precise, it was hard because it wasn't. That unpredictability is what makes Sharp Mint so terrifying. And the first person to take a shot at it was an obbyist by the name of Speechless. Mint Skies is separated into 5 checkpoints, which aren't available to the player during a Sharp Mint run. This didn't stop Speechless though, as he posted his first progression video of Sharp Mint, already reaching checkpoint 4 on December 22nd, 2023. It was an insane feat by itself, and this seemed like the obby to finally solidify Speechless as one of the best hobbyists on Roblox. People started saying this was it. This was going to be the moment. Speechless finally cements himself as one of the best. And honestly, with how fast he was progressing, it felt inevitable. But then, nothing. No updates and no progression. Eventually, it came out that he dropped the obby. He just stopped. And just like that, all the hype and the expectations were gone. It was a gut-punching reminder of how ruthless Sharp Mint really was. It didn't matter how far you got. If you didn't beat it, it meant nothing. And with Speechless out of the picture, the obby was wide open again. And for this exact reason, Monster is a Block started grinding Sharp Mint. Something about seeing a top player back out sparked something in it. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that familiar hunger to do what others couldn't. Block was having an astronomical rise in the obby community, quickly becoming one of the best on Roblox. He started seriously grinding obbies in late 2022, and only a year later, he had beaten Anata wo Horbimasu, MARCUSTERRY, and Pyro's Zenith. All obbies ranked in the top 20 hardest ever beaten, even today. In terms of improvement, absolutely no one was moving faster. But when Block announced he was going for Sharp Mint, it caught everyone off guard. When he beat Mint Skies, the non-hardcore version of the obby, he'd straight up said it wasn't even a good jank obby. And now, here he was, grinding the hardest version of it. As weird as it seemed, it started making sense real fast. He dropped his first progress video. Just like Speechless, he was already deep in. Near the end of checkpoint 4, he was destroying the obby. And for anyone watching, it kind of felt like deja vu. It looked like the same story. Quick progress, huge hype, a potential verification. But this time, the ending was different. Block didn't slow down, and he didn't drop the obby. Block did this. In that moment, the Jang behemoth that had stopped Speechless, the obby that had stayed unbeaten since MARCUSTERRY's false verification, had finally fallen, and it was monster as a block who brought it down. Sharp Mint was no longer unbeatable, and now only two were left. Back There Benjamin and Stairway to Heaven. Up until this point, every obby in the MARCUSTERRY saga had hovered around the same ballpark. Anata wo Horbimasu sat in the lower end of tier 17, while Sharp Mint pushed that tier to its absolute breaking point. But these last two were in a completely different tier of their own. Two completely different monsters, one short, precise, and agonizingly brutal, the other long, grueling, and tedious. And yet, they shared a title no other obby had ever earned. They were both tier 18, and the first serious attempts were made on Back There Benjamin. It wasn't the longest obby out there. A full run would only take about 4 to 5 minutes, but what it lacked in length, it made up for with raw difficulty. Back There Benjamin gets unimaginably difficult from the very first jump. It demands a level of control and precision that most players simply aren't prepared for. Every single input has to be perfect. There is no margin for error, and not a single safety net. These are the kind of jumps that, to an average Roblox player, wouldn't even seem possible. The kind you fail over and over and over again. Not because you don't understand them, but because the execution is just that precise. Especially a jump nearing the end of the obby, called the Back There Benjamin Double Lodge. A jump considered not just the hardest jump in the obby, but one of the hardest ever landed on Roblox. For years, this obby sat untouched, its verification standing on a lie, and no one had been able to prove otherwise. So when the time to finally bring it down came, there couldn't have been anyone else more suited for the task than Boomsisuk. By this point, he had already established himself as one of, if not the best. He wasn't just beating these absurdly difficult obbies, he was doing it with consistency. Tower Vacant Hindrances, Anata wo Horbimasu, both had been destroyed by him. And now, with Sharp Mint out of the way, all eyes were on Back There Benjamin. Boomsisuk's main reason for grinding it was simple: to beat MARCUSTERRY's lie. And while many considered the obby to be the human limit, luckily, Boomsisuk had built a reputation on breaking limits. For 4 years, a lie stood at the top of Roblox's hardest obby. On July 21st, 2021, MARCUSTERRY supposedly claimed victory over Stairway to Heaven, a tier 18 obby. The hardest obby ever beaten, by miles. But behind the verification was a massive lie. Marcus didn't beat it, and he didn't earn it. The truth eventually came out. MARCUSTERRY didn't even exist at all. Operated by Wathek and Akira, two players who faked the impossible, they created a fake hobbyist and played it off as legitimate. And when it all collapsed, one question echoed through the community. Could it ever be done for real? Legitimately? Well, Block thought so. At the start of the year, he had already taken down Sharp Mint, one of the many obbies MARCUSTERRY had left behind. Then, he beat IKEA Tower. Then, Tower Spelling Fate. Each time, the hardest obby ever beaten. He was changing obby history. And then, came his biggest goal yet. Stairway to Heaven. An obby once believed to be tier 21, now challenged by the greatest player alive. And so, began the most ambitious climb the community had ever witnessed. Hundreds watched and cheered, grinded alongside him, and Block climbed higher than anyone expected, higher than anyone had ever gone. Step after step, jump after jump, he looked unstoppable, until he reached the final stretch. And then, the final jump, and he fell. Again, again, and again. Over and over, Block stood at the edge of legacy, at the edge of Roblox's greatest achievement, but he couldn't do it. It seemed like Stairway to Heaven was never meant to be beaten. And then, Block announced that he would be leaving the community and stepping away from obbying altogether, citing a growing lack of interest in obbies in general. It was a sudden end to one of the fastest rises the community had ever seen. And in that announcement, the hope that Stairway to Heaven would get beaten had disappeared. But there was still one more player. A player that has had history dethroning Marcus. And now, he wasn't scared to do it one last time. On May 3rd, 2025, 4 years after MARCUSTERRY's infamous completion, Boomsasuk did it. He beat Stairway to Heaven, legitimately. The obby wasn't impossible, and MARCUSTERRY wasn't unbeatable. After 4 long years, it finally happened. Marcus had finally been dethroned. It took a pretty long time, but maybe, just maybe, Marcus was right about one thing after all.